Disclaimer: it's inspired by reality, shaped by imagination.
Nobody on The View expected the studio to fall that quiet. Julia Roberts had barely settled into her seat when Joy Behar decided to test her. One moment, they were smiling for the cameras. The next, Joy dropped a question that felt like a jab wrapped in a joke. "Julia, do you think cancel culture is a threat to creativity, or are some people just mad they can't make offensive jokes anymore?" Julia didn't laugh. She sat forward, elbows on the table, eyes locked on Joy with a look that said she had been waiting for someone to ask her that out loud. Whoopi raised a brow. Sunny shifted in her chair. The audience sensed something was coming. You could feel the air tighten as Julia drew a slow breath, almost like she was bracing herself. Then she said it. Not loud, not dramatic, just clear enough to slice through the studio. Cancel culture doesn't protect people. It scares artists into silence, and comedy doesn't survive silence. Joy blinked, thrown off by how direct it was. The audience gasped. Even Whoopi sat back like she'd just seen something rare. Joy tried to laugh it off, but Julia wasn't joking. She leaned in again, ready to take the conversation somewhere Joy clearly didn't expect. And that's where everything started to unravel. Because what came next wasn't a debate, it was a collision. The studio was still reacting to Julia's first strike when Joy leaned back in her chair, folded her arms, and gave the kind of half-smile she uses right before she pushes a guest into deeper waters. "Julia, you make it sound like comics and actors are victims," Joy said, "but a lot of the people who complain about cancel culture are the ones who never wanted to evolve in the first place." A few audience members clapped, not many, enough for Joy to hear them and feel a momentary boost. Julia didn't flinch. She kept her posture steady, hands lightly clasped on the table, the picture of someone who came prepared. "This isn't about refusing to evolve," she replied. "It's about people being afraid to speak, afraid to try something new, afraid to take creative risks. Art needs room to breathe, but people are scared to even inhale." That line earned its own ripple of reaction. Whoopi watched the two of them like she was monitoring a small fire that could turn into a full blaze. "Let's try to stay grounded," she said, though her voice held the tone of someone who knew grounding wasn't going to happen today. Sunny cut in with a lawyer's precision. "Julia, isn't accountability a necessary part of any cultural shift? Some people weren't canceled, they were called out." Julia nodded. "I get that. But what I'm talking about is different. It's the atmosphere of fear. If a young comedian tests a joke at a club and someone records it out of context, that person's career is over before it starts. That's not accountability, that's fear policing creativity." Joy lifted her mug but didn't drink. She held it like a prop. Fear or consequences? You know, for a long time people punched down. Now the punch has a price. Julia's tone softened, but her words didn't. "Joy, you've been in comedy for decades. You know better than anyone that jokes start messy. They start rough, they get shaped. Nobody goes on stage with a fully refined idea. That process is disappearing because people are terrified to even try." Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Julia kept talking, not over her, just fast enough that Joy didn't have room to interrupt. "And it's not just comedy, it's film, it's writing. People are testing ideas in private rooms instead of public spaces because they're worried they'll get labeled for trying something different." The audience murmured, not dramatic, just a steady hum that told everyone the message was landing. Joy set her mug down, more forcefully than she meant to. "I think you're exaggerating. Terrified? Come on, it's 2025. If someone has talent, they'll shine. If someone gets backlash, maybe it's because their joke wasn't good." Julia's eyes narrowed just a touch. "Joy, backlash is fine. Backlash is part of art, but permanent exile for experiments? That's new, and it's hurting comedy more than any bad joke ever has." Whoopi lifted her hand. "Let me jump in for a second," she said, her tone calm but alert. "Julia's saying the fear is changing the way people create. Joy's saying the accountability is overdue. Both can be true." But the sparks were already flying. Neither woman wanted a middle. Joy turned directly toward Julia. "Let me ask you something. Do you think anyone deserves to be canceled? Anybody at all?" Julia didn't hesitate. "I think people deserve conversations, correction, growth. But public execution online isn't growth. It's entertainment disguised as moral vigilance." Sunny leaned forward like she just spotted a point worth capturing. So you're saying cancel culture is entertainment? Julia nodded. A lot of the time, yes. People watch careers crumble and treat it like a sport. Joy threw up her hands. Julia, people get called out for real harm, real behavior. It's not a spectator sport. Julia's voice lowered. Maybe not to you, but scroll through social media. Watch how fast people pile on. Watch how much they enjoy the fall. Tell me that's not spectacle. The crowd let out a reaction loud enough to make Joy sit up straighter. Whoopi, sensing the tension thickening, tried to pivot the conversation slightly. Julia, when did you first feel like this shift was happening? Julia took a breath. During the pandemic. Everyone was online. Everyone was angry. The line between accountability and punishment disappeared, and once people got used to taking someone down in a tweet, it became the norm. Joy leaned in just as sharply. So you're saying the public is the problem? I think the culture of instant judgment is, Julia answered. Joy's lips tightened. Sounds like you're blaming the audience. Julia met her stare without blinking. I'm blaming the system that rewards outrage more than understanding. A few people clapped again, louder this time. Joy wasn't having it. You know what that sounds like to me? It sounds like someone who doesn't want to say the real issue. Some jokes shouldn't be made anymore. Some behavior deserves consequences. Julia nodded slowly, almost sadly. And some people deserve a chance to learn instead of being erased. The table fell quiet for a moment. Not a peaceful quiet, a charged one. The kind that told everyone the fire had only just started. The charged silence sat between them for a full beat, not long enough to cool anything down, just long enough for everyone in the room to feel the pressure building. Joy was the first to break it. You say people are being erased, Joy said, hands slicing through the air, but let's be honest. The folks who complain the loudest about cancel culture are usually the ones who got used to saying whatever they wanted without any accountability. Julia leaned back slightly, not defensive, but deliberate, like she was giving Joy room to finish before she stepped back in. You're framing it like there are only two kinds of people, she replied. The villains who deserve cancellation and the victims who cry about it. That's not real life. There are people in the middle who make a mistake, apologize, and get no path back. Joy scoffed. Since when does an apology automatically erase harm? It doesn't, Julia said, but it should count for something. It should mean a door isn't slammed forever. Sunny jumped in before Joy could fire back. Julia, when you talk about the door being slammed, are you thinking of anyone specific? A comedian, a writer, someone you know? Julia paused, and the studio leaned forward. This was the moment viewers at home would rewind for, the one producers would clip for the promo. I've seen young writers lose jobs over a tweet they wrote at 19. Tweets they already deleted, tweets they apologized for, but the internet dug them up, and suddenly studios didn't want to touch them. Joy waved her hand. Julia, come on. Studios make their own decisions. If someone's getting fired over a tweet, maybe that tweet wasn't such a small thing. Julia's jaw tightened. 19-year-olds say stupid things. You said stupid things when you were 19. So did I. The difference is nobody was archiving our mistakes. That line hit Joy harder than she expected. Her mouth opened, but no ready comeback arrived. Whoopi rocked gently in her chair, watching the energy zigzag across the table. We're talking about fear and creativity, she reminded them. Let's stay there. But they weren't staying anywhere neutral now. The heat was rising too fast. Joy straightened her cards, even though she didn't need to. It was something she did when she felt challenged, a small physical reset. Here's the problem I have, Julia. You're acting like cancel culture is this giant monster stalking artists. But what about the people harmed by the jokes? The communities being mocked? Don't they get a say? They do, Julia said. They should. But disagreeing with a joke doesn't mean someone's career gets burned to the ground. Context matters. Intention matters. Growth matters. Joy wasn't convinced. Growth doesn't happen without pressure, without consequences. Consequences, yes, Julia agreed. A permanent scarlet letter? No! Sunny leaned forward. Let's get specific. Take comedians. Should they be allowed to joke about anything, any topic? Julia didn't hesitate. I think comedians should be allowed to explore. That's how the art form works. Some material won't land.
Some will offend. That's part of comedy. You refine by trying, failing, adjusting. Joy pointed at her. Right, but if you fail by insulting a whole group of people, that's not just failure, that's harm, Julia. And that harm should be talked about, addressed. But a conversation is different from a takedown. Joy wasn't done. But when someone says something harmful, the public has the right to react. That's not a takedown, that's democracy. Julia leaned in, not antagonistic, focused. Democracy isn't the same as a mob. A mob doesn't debate, it punishes. The audience reacted with a mix of gasps and applause. Even the camera operator momentarily lost their smooth glide, the steadiness shaking for half a second. Joy frowned. So now the public is a mob. No, Julia said, the public is reacting to the incentive social media created. Platforms reward outrage. They amplify it. They profit from it. Joy's eyebrows shot up. So now it's social media's fault. It's the system around us, not individuals. The system pushes people towards extremes because extremes get clicks. Wilby yelled out a long breath. That's not wrong. Joy turned to her. Whose side are you on? Whoopi lifted her hands. I'm not choosing sides. I'm saying the platforms do encourage people to jump before thinking. Sunny added, the question is whether that pressure is actually hurting creativity, and that's where Julia is making her case. Joy exhaled sharply. We're giving way too much sympathy to people who could avoid all of this by just being careful. Julia looked right at her. Being careful isn't the same as being creative. A murmur of agreement rolled across the room. Joy felt it. She didn't like it. So what's your solution? She demanded. What do you want? A world where nobody calls anything out? A world where artists get a free pass? No, Julia said. I want a world where there's room for mistakes. A world where artists can stumble, learn, and grow instead of being pushed off a cliff. Joy tapped her fingers on the table, each tap louder than the last. Some cliffs are there for a reason. Julia shook her head. No, Joy, most cliffs were built by people who enjoy watching others fall. That line shifted the temperature in the studio. Even Joy looked stunned for a second. Wilby pressed her lips together like she didn't want to say, all right, that was a bar, but it was written all over her face. Julia continued, softer now, but sharper in content. We're losing nuance, and nuance is the backbone of storytelling, comedy, art, everything that makes culture breathe. If creators have to walk on glass, we'll end up with nothing but safe, bland work. Joy crossed her arms. Maybe safe is better than harmful. Julia held her gaze. Safe is the opposite of art. The room exploded in applause. Joy stiffened. The clash had officially reached full heat, and both women knew they weren't backing down now.
The air felt heavy now. The kind of weight that settles on a room when two people stop debating ideas and start scraping against something deeper, personal, raw, unavoidable. Joy leaned forward again, but this time it wasn't about the topic. It was about reclaiming control of a moment that had slipped away from her. Julia, you talk like you're defending the entire creative world, Joy said. But be honest, are you saying this because you felt that pressure yourself? Are you worried someone's going to come after you next? A quiet ripple moved through the audience. The kind of ripple that happens when someone crosses a line, or maybe hits a nerve. Julia didn't react right away. She kept her eyes on Joy, not offended, but definitely surprised by how sharp the question was. Sunny winced. Joy. No, Joy insisted. If we're having this conversation, let's have it. Full stop. Julia took a breath. You want honesty? Fine. Everyone in Hollywood feels that pressure. Every actor, every writer, every director. You think I'm exempt? Nobody is. But this conversation isn't about me. It's about the culture as a whole. Joy raised an eyebrow. You sure? Because that speech you gave sounded personal. It becomes personal when people I've mentored, people I've hired, people who dreamed of telling stories lose their careers over one mistake from years ago. That's personal to me. That landed hard. But Joy wasn't backing off. She smelled an opening and pushed. Are we talking about that writer on the Netflix project? The one who tweeted something disgusting in college? Sonny's head snapped toward her. Joy, you can't say. Joy shrugged. It was public? Julia's expression changed, just slightly, but enough to show that Joy had touched on something she shouldn't have. Whoopi stepped in gently. Joy, let's not name people who aren't here to speak for themselves. I didn't name them. You almost did. Julia looked down at her hands for a moment, then lifted her chin. That young woman apologized. She wrote privately to people she hurt. She took accountability. She was 20. She lost a job that could have changed her life, and she hasn't worked since. Joy didn't blink. Actions have consequences, and compassion has a purpose, Julia shot back. The studio fell silent again. This time it wasn't dramatic. It was sad. Julia's voice softened, but the softness made it more intense. People keep saying cancel culture is accountability, but accountability should help someone grow. What we're doing now isn't growth, it's destruction. And destruction isn't moral, Joy. It's lazy. Joy tightened her jaw. So now anyone who calls something out is lazy? That's not what I said. It's what you implied. No, Julia said calmly. I'm saying that people who enjoy the pile-on, who get a thrill at watching someone crumble, those people are choosing the easy path. It's harder to sit down and talk things out. It's harder to forgive. There it was. Forgiveness. A word that doesn't trend on Twitter. A word that doesn't get clips, clicks, or applause. Sonny leaned in. Julia, can I ask you something? Do you think cancel culture comes from pain? From people who've been ignored for so long that calling someone out feels like the only power they have? Julia nodded slowly. Absolutely. But when pain becomes the whole economy of the internet, we end up hurting people who weren't trying to hurt anyone else. And that cycle keeps going. No one heals. Joy sighed, and for the first time, she didn't come back with a quick jab. She sat there, thinking, which made the moment even heavier. But the silence didn't last long. A producer shouted from behind the cameras, 30 seconds to break! Joy ignored them. She wasn't ready to end the moment. Not until she said what she needed to say. So tell me this, Joy said, voice a little lower now. If someone says something offensive about women or immigrants or the LGBTQ community, should they just get a pat on the head? A try again next time? Julia shook her head. No, they should face consequences, real ones. But consequences don't have to be eternal. And who decides when it's enough? You? The community. But the community needs to allow space for redemption. And right now, nobody gets redemption. Not really. Joy stared at her, breathing a little harder now. Not angry. Not yet. More like she was confronting the part of herself she didn't show often. The part that knew the world wasn't as simple as she argued it to be. Redemption is earned, and punishment should fit the mistake, not bury someone alive. The audience started clapping again, but this time the applause wasn't explosive. It was empathetic, human. Whoopi glanced toward the crew. We're waving at me, we've got to go to break. But nobody moved. Julia didn't stop. Joy, I'm not asking you to stop standing up for people. You're incredible at that. I'm asking you to consider that sometimes the person getting torn apart online is a kid who made a bad call and doesn't deserve to have their entire future ruined. Joy tapped her fingers. You're assuming the harm they caused doesn't matter. I'm saying we can address harm without destroying human beings. Joy looked away for a second. The camera caught it. Everyone saw it. That was the emotional crack in the debate. The moment the argument stopped being about jokes, tweets or writers and shifted into something deeper. Something about what kind of people we want to be. Something about mercy. Something about fear. Julia finished quietly. And if artists spend all their time panicking about what mistake might end their career, we won't get honest stories. We won't get brave stories. We'll get silence. Joy stared at her, unable to fire back. Whoopi finally broke in. "We've got to go to break before ABC has a heart attack." The audience laughed again, tension easing, but not disappearing. As they rolled to commercial, Julia and Joy didn't look away from each other. Both women knew it. The real explosion was coming next. The moment the show returned from commercial, you could feel the leftover tension sitting on the stage like a storm cloud that hadn't decided where to strike. The audience clapped, but the applause didn't have the usual energy. Everyone sensed the shift. Everyone felt the collision coming. Whoopi jumped in with her usual steady presence. "All right, we're back. Before the break, things got a little lively." Joy snorted. "That's one word." The audience laughed nervously. Julia didn't. She wasn't smiling anymore. Whoopi nodded toward her. "Julia, I think you were finishing a thought?" "I was saying that fear is killing creativity, and if we're not careful, it'll kill comedy next." Joy leaned back, crossing her arms. "Comedy needs to evolve. Some jokes should disappear." "Sure, but disappearing because they're outdated is different from disappearing because someone's terrified they'll get fired." Joy tilted her head. "Are you talking about comedians or actors?" "Everyone," Julia said. "Writers, directors, stand-up comics, young people trying to break in. When fear becomes the creative environment, everything gets watered down." "But maybe," Joy said carefully, "maybe people are afraid because they know what they're saying hurts others. Maybe they should be afraid." Julia's jaw tightened. "Fear can't be the foundation of art." "And harm can't be the foundation of humor," Joy shot back. The audience gasped lightly. Even Sunny and Sarah exchanged looks. The space between the two women felt like it was turning electric. Julia leaned forward. "Joy, you're acting like I want people to be cruel, as if I'm defending bigotry. I'm not. I'm defending nuance, humanity, the ability to make a mistake and not get banished from the industry for life." Joy's voice sharpened. "Nobody gets banished unless they deserve it." "You know that's not true," Julia said calmly. Joy's mouth tightened. "Give me an example." "You want names? Because I'm not going to humiliate people on national television for the sake of a soundbite." "Convenient." There was the spark. Julia's expression didn't change, but the temperature around her did. "What's convenient," Julia replied, "is pretending cancel culture doesn't go too far because you agree with the targets most of the time." The audience let out a long collective "ooh." "Excuse me?" Joy said. "You heard me." Julia said, "When someone on the wrong political side says something bad, they get burned at the stake. When someone on the right side does it, everyone suddenly discovers the concept of forgiveness. It's inconsistent, and it's hypocritical." Joy's hands tightened on her note cards. She wasn't used to being challenged with this much precision, especially not from a Hollywood legend. "And you know what else?" Julia continued. "People are terrified of saying that out loud because they don't want the internet coming for them next." Joy's tone dropped. "So now you're accusing me of hypocrisy?" Julia didn't look away. "I'm saying you defend fairness until the person in trouble isn't someone you agree with." Joy sat up straighter. "Julia, I've spent my entire career speaking truth to power. I know, and I respect you for it, I do. But speaking truth to power isn't the same as speaking truth to a scared 20-year-old who made a mistake, and we shouldn't treat them the same." Joy had her head. "You think people should just get a pass." "No," Julia said. "I think they should get a path." That line hit so hard, the audience reacted with a deep, emotional murmur.
But Joy wasn't done. "Let me say something," she said, voice rising. "Cancel culture isn't perfect. Nothing is. But without public pressure, half the people who've said awful things would still be working like nothing happened. So what do you suggest? No consequences?" Julia didn't hesitate. "Consequences are fine. Consequences without a comeback are not. A society that doesn't believe in redemption is a society that's forgotten how to grow." Joy raised her finger. "That's a pretty speech, but it ignores the pain those words cause." "And your argument ignores the pain of unending punishment," Julia said. "We can acknowledge both." Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Julia kept going, her calm finally giving way to something more raw. "I've seen people lose their entire lives over one moment. Not a pattern, not years of harm. One mistake. That's not justice. That's blood sport." Silence. The audience froze. Joy leaned in, lowering her voice to something sharper, almost personal. "So what are you really saying, Julia? That the world should go easy on powerful people like you?" Julia's face changed, not with anger, with disappointment. "That's not fair," she said quietly, "and you know it." Sunny jumped in. "Joy!" "No," Joy said, not breaking eye contact with Julia. "She came in here swinging. I can swing back." Whoopi tried a gentle redirect. "We're not swinging, we're discussing." Joy ignored her. "Tell me, Julia, what exactly are you afraid of? That one day something you've done will surface and the world won't forgive you?" That's it. The line no one expected. The line that shoved everything off the cliff. Julia let out a slow breath. Her eyes didn't leave Joy's. Her voice stayed steady, but now there was emotion behind it that hadn't been there before. "I'm afraid," Julia said softly, "that we're creating a generation of artists who will never take a risk again, and that when the dust settles, we'll all wonder why our stories sound the same." Joy didn't answer. She didn't move. She didn't blink. Whoopi raised her hands. Okay, we're taking a break." The producers cut to commercial so fast, it almost looked like a mistake. The audience exhaled all at once, and Julia Roberts stayed staring forward. The storm wasn't over. It had just reached its breaking point.
When the cameras returned from the break, the studio felt lighter, but the energy was still thick with everything that had just unfolded. Julia and Joy sat facing each other, the tension now tempered by a kind of reluctant acknowledgement. The audience, leaning forward in their seats, knew they had just witnessed more than a debate. They had seen a collision of ideals, experience, and heart. Julia's voice softened. "Look, Joy, I respect your perspective. I get why people want accountability. I want accountability too. But the culture we've created doesn't leave room for nuance anymore. People are afraid to create, to speak, to make mistakes, and that's the real loss." Joy exhaled, her arms uncrossing, her tone calmer. Maybe I was too focused on the consequences and forgot to consider what you were saying about growth and redemption. I can see your point about nuance. It doesn't excuse harm, but maybe we've gone too far in punishing mistakes." Whoopi chimed in with her signature warmth. "Maybe this is the moment both sides needed to hear each other. Accountability and compassion don't have to be opposites." Sunny nodded. "And the conversation matters more than the conflict. People watching at home are hearing both sides. That's powerful." Julia gave a small, almost shy smile. "If we can create space for discussion instead of destruction, maybe we can have more honest art, more bold comedy, more real stories." Joy finally smiled back, a mix of relief and recognition. "And maybe the audience and the artists themselves deserve a chance to breathe." The camera panned over the audience, who erupted into a warm standing ovation. Some cheered for Julia, some for Joy, and some simply for the dialogue that had been too rare for television, honest, emotional, and unapologetically human. As the show wrapped, Whoopi added one final reflection. What we just witnessed isn't just about cancel culture. It's about forgiveness, growth, and learning to listen, even when we disagree.
That's the kind of conversation America needs more of. The final shot lingered on Julia and Joy, shaking hands with mutual respect, the tension replaced by understanding. The audience continued to applaud, the studio buzzing with the feeling that they had been part of something memorable, something that would spark debate online, on social media, and in living rooms everywhere. The outro teaser flashed across the screen. What Julia said off-camera after the show left everyone talking. And with that, the episode ended, leaving viewers thinking long after the cameras stopped rolling.